Oh, it's Mr. Redden.
Hi.
Okay. We're waiting on a couple of jurors, but is there anything that we need to discuss outside the presence of the jury?
Your Honor, we forgot to put on record that Mr. Arnold was also stipulating the state's proposed 62 and 63 yesterday.
Okay, is that right, Mr. Arnold?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. When the jury gets in here, I will go ahead and announce that. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, hopefully these jurors will get here soon. You may sit down.
Okay.
Go ahead and invite the jury in. Okay. Will counsel please stipulate to the presence of the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you all may be seated. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be getting started in just a moment or two. It is very important that you be here on time. We've lost about 18 minutes, so you're all like brides. We can't get started without all of you here, all right? All right, first order of business is that the parties have stipulated to the admission of exhibits, plaintiff's exhibits 62 and 63. Those exhibits are admitted. All right, next witness, or first witness, I should say.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Mary Kay Holthus.
Can you please raise your right hand? You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Mary Kay Holthus, MaryKayHolthus.
We're on this way.
Did you get that? She said that really fast. Yes, I did. Okay, I'm nervous on this side.
Sorry. Please watch your step. Please sit close to the
Counsel?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Are you currently a judicial district court judge?
I am,
How long have you been on the bench?
since 2019.
Were you elected or appointed?
Elected?
Since then, have you handled what we refer to as a mixed docket?
I have.
Can you describe what that is for the jury, please?
Means I do half criminal and half civil. So on some days I'm doing civil trials and calendars, and opposite days I'm doing criminal.
I want to focus in on criminal calendars. What types of matters are you handling on a day-to-day basis?
All types that come to the district court, which are basically felonies and gross misdemeanors.
Are there various types of hearings associated with criminal cases?
There are.
Would that include arraignments, guilty pleas, sentencings, revocations, and trials such as that?
It would.
Can you explain to the jury briefly what a guilty plea hearing is and how it unfolds?
A guilty plea hearing is when, obviously, most cases don't go to trial, they negotiate, and it's a negotiation between the defense attorney and the state. Defendant will enter into a guilty plea agreement, and then at the guilty plea hearing, we do a canvass. They review paperwork, sign off on it, and then we also engage them orally to make sure they understand everything they're doing and the rights that they're giving up in exchange for their guilty pleas.
Subsequent to a guilty plea hearing, is in the matter set for sentencing?
It is.
And what is a sentencing?
A sentencing is when they're going to be sentenced pursuant to negotiation or otherwise, whether they're going to get probation or prison. After we accept the guilty plea, we refer the matter to parole and probation. Parole and probation does what we call pre-sentence investigation report, criminal background, social background, medical background, all the history of the individual for consideration ultimately in passing sentencing.
Are there times in which a criminal defendant will appear in front of you out of custody?
Yes,
And are there other times in which they will appear in custody?
yes,
As a result of that, are there some sentencing hearings in which people are remanded into custody from out of custody?
there are.
Are there security measures in place in the courtroom for these out-of-custody defendants as well as the in-custody?
Well, there's security in the courtroom. We have marshals and we have corrections officers watching. I don't know per se if there's anything special.
No, that answers the question. Are there times in which you will sentence someone to probation?
Yes,
Other times in which you may send them into custody, correct?
yes,
When you sentence someone to probation, are they still monitored by the court in some way?
not by the court, by parole and probation.
And what is parole and probation?
Parole and probation is the division responsible for supervising individuals that are on probation. They may have to report, they tell them what to do, help them find jobs, or put them in programming, get evaluations to see what kind of programming is best to serve that individual.
Are there times in which defendants who you presided over will get probation, they'll go out into the community, and then they'll essentially mess up on probation itself?
Yes,
And would they be brought back in front of you at that point in time?
not right away. Sometimes P&P tends to work with them a lot of times to give them multiple chances. But at some point, when they get to a certain level, then parole and probation will put on what we call a violation report, saying that they're violating their probation. Judge, it's time for you to take a look. We think they should go do their time now.
And then that goes in front of you, and what's that proceeding called?
Revocation hearing?
At revocation hearings, do you essentially make a decision if the defendant should remain on probation or be remanded into custody?
Yes,
I want to bring you back to November 20th of 2023. On that date, do you recall whether or not you took a guilty plea from the defendant in a prior case?
I do not specifically.
When I say the defendant, do you understand who I'm referring to?
I do.
Who?
Mr. Redden?
Do you see Mr. Redden in court?
I do. Sitting between his two attorneys over there at the table.
Would the record reflect identification of the defendant?
Okay, there's three gentlemen and he's.
Middle
right
guy.
in the middle?
Yep.
Okay, let the record so reflect.
So as you sit here today, you don't recall taking a plea from the defendant?
I do not.
If I were to show you a document that memorializes that plea, would that maybe refresh your recollection?
Yeah.
May I approach?
Yes.
Me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness, so sorry.
So I'm showing you court minutes as well as a guilty plea from November 20th of 2023. Are court minutes essentially a record of any court proceeding that happens
They are.
in the courtroom? Do you recognize your name on there?
I do.
And do you see journal entry which suggests that you took the defendant's plea?
Yes,
Okay. And that would be on November 20th of 2023?
correct.
Do you remember which charges he pled guilty to?
Attempt battery, substantial bodily harm.
Okay.
That I remember.
Okay. And so on this particular date, when you took the defendant's plea in the prior case, was he released from custody?
He was,
And was that pursuant to an agreement in the guilty plea?
correct.
When he's released from custody, I would presume he goes back out into the community. Is that
He
right?
does,
And then you set a proceeding to follow the guilty plea.
correct. The
What was
sentencing date.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about the sentencing date. You mentioned that you received some materials to review in order to prepare for sentencing.
Right,
And in this particular case, did you receive those materials?
I did.
And what were those materials?
Well, I always have the guilty plea agreement, so I know what the negotiations were, and the pre-sentence investigation report,
If-
primarily.
Primarily, you said? If sentencing was set in this case on January 3rd of this year, when would you have prepared your calendar and reviewed those materials?
Sometime in the week prior,
And
usually
so-
closer in time, so I remember. I don't remember, because it was a holiday kind of time, it was our first day back. It may have been like the Friday before.
Okay. And so you know some things in advance about the defendant when you're going in to do a sentencing hearing. Is that
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Do you remember reviewing a PSI in this case?
I do.
Can you explain, just briefly for the jury, when you're reviewing a PSI, what are the types of things you're looking for in order to determine the appropriate sentence?
Generally, the first thing, partly because it comes first in the PSI, is the age. Because depending on whether, if it's somebody older who's never been in trouble before versus somebody super young, a lot harder to send an 18-year-old to prison, to be honest. And just kind of, so age is what I look at first.
Continue.
And then I kind of peruse, is it somebody, they have a lot of AKAs, that kind of gives you a little heads up. A look at the family background to kind of see what we're dealing with. Is this somebody who's had problems growing up? Has there been foster care kinds of situation? What's the family situation? A lot of times we'll have, dad's in prison, mom took off, raised by grandma, all those things that you're kind of mitigating maybe on some level the behavior, or trying to understand what you need to address and where you need to go. Obviously, one of the big things is the criminal history. I always jot down how many felonies, how many gross misdemeanors, how many misdemeanors, and then looking specifically at those, what types are they? Is this somebody who's got a drug issue that needs to be addressed? Are we looking at stolen identity of another, possessions of credit cards and stuff, which more often than not also indicates a drug problem and where these crimes are focused. And then kind of in a separate category is violence. And sex offenders, I suppose, another one that are a little bit different.
Is prior violence an important factor for you when deciding whether to put someone back out on the streets or put them in custody?
Hugely.
And in this particular case, did you note prior violence in Mr. Redden's history when reviewing his PSI?
I did.
As you sit here today, do you have a recollection of any
I do.
specifics?
I know that when I did the PSI, he was about 30 years old, and his first criminal conviction was in 2012, battery domestic violence. So literally, he hit 18 and it's domestic violence on his record. And throughout the remainder, until I saw him again, he averaged one battery domestic violence conviction a year, always. He had 3 felony convictions. He had an attempt theft that actually started out, it was pled to an attempt theft, but it started out as a robbery, which is the violent taking of property from someone else against their will, a classic crime of violence. He had 2 battery domestic violence felony convictions. You get a felony after you have so many misdemeanors, they start becoming felony. He had a battery with substantial bodily harm conviction. He had a gross misdemeanor for malicious destruction of private property, which started out as a attempt home invasion, meaning kicking in someone's home. Again, pled down to the malicious destruction. I believe that was the one I had him on probation for. I didn't recall it, but I've since learned that he was in my department on probation for that, and I ultimately revoked him because of the case that I was seeing him on back at the time of the attack.
Okay, so that's a lot of information.
I know, sorry,
That's
I
okay.
do that.
I appreciate that.
Okay, do me a favor, both of you, make sure you let him get his question out before you respond and vice versa. My court reporter is really good at what she does, but she's never mastered the art of taking down 2 people at the same time. Sorry.
In addition to criminal history, are you also reviewing the PSI to determine if that individual has had opportunities with probation, services, mental health treatment, and all those types of things?
Absolutely.
And in this case, as you perused Mr. Redden's PSI, did you see evidence to suggest that he had had several opportunities with the system when it comes to services?
I did. All of the crimes that we see, they're in a chart form, and then next to the chart is kind of what they got, probation, prison, violations and whatnot. And so you can tell that he had had probation a number of times, that he had violated a number of times. According to his report, he had gone through mental health court, had multiple sanctions and got in trouble a lot of times, but ultimately was passed through and graduated from the mental health court program. According to the PSI 2 times, he definitely had jail terms, and he had been to prison for on 1 term.
And so you had mentioned a moment ago, you have since realized that you previously revoked his probation.
Correct.
I want the record to be clear about that. When you're reviewing his PSI, preparing to sentence him when the incident occurs, you don't recall that information.
No clue.
Fair to say there are hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal defendants who've come in front of you over the years.
Yes.
And you have since learned that you had previously revoked his probation and sent him to jail.
Correct. And I don't know if I sent him to jail. I don't know if he was in custody and he stipulated that he had violated his probation. I mean, he may have been agreeable to it. I don't know any of the facts of that. I just know that I somehow ruled you're revoked.
Understood. I want to now move forward to January 3rd of this year. So on that date, you proceed into court for your criminal calendar.
Right.
Do you remember how many matters you had on that day?
I don't?
Were there a mix of both in custody and out of custody defendants?
Yes.
At some point in time, did Mr. Redden, was his case called?
It was.
If you can summarize for the jury what happened when his case was called initially.
I mean, nothing. It was just the typical. He was in on a bench warrant return as well because after we let him out, he didn't show up. So Mr. Almasi, his attorney, had put him on for a bench warrant return, meaning come into court and ask not to quash the warrant, not to arrest him on it. And so
everyone understands he was out of custody on the day of his sentencing.
he was.
He had a bench warrant in that case, but he walked in from the street.
Correct.
When
He had failed to appear at the prior sentencing date.
okay, that's what I'm looking for. So there was a prior sentencing date. He doesn't show up for that. A bench warrant is generated, and then he comes in out of custody at the second sentence.
Right.
Explain for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how it is that the sentencing starts to proceed. Who talks first, and how does that go?
The state always has the right to argue first, in a lot of negotiations, they'll negotiate away the right to argue for any particular sentence. They might agree to probation, they might make no recommendation. There's a number of things. They could stipulate to a sentence per the deal. In this case, because the defendant failed to appear, any negotiation previously offered by the state is off the table, and the state, what we call, regains the right to argue. So even if they were agreeing to some other sentence previous, because he failed to appear, they have the right to argue for the sentence. So,
So in this case, that occurred, and then I would
Correct.
presume the deputy district attorney that was in court that day would argue the sentence.
he did.
And he would recommend whatever sentence he deemed appropriate.
He did.
Ultimately, the decision would have been up to you.
It was.
After the district attorney argues for their sentence, what happens next?
Then I turn to the defendant, Mr. Redden. He goes next. Do you have anything to say to the court before I pronounce sentence? And he was very calm and articulate, and basically he's been doing great. He's at a better place than he ever was before. And, you know, I pointed out your violent history, your failure to appear, and I don't remember whether mental illness came up, but I had said that he had been through mental health court. In his PSI, he had claimed that mental illness wasn't an issue for him, so it's kind of hard to, I didn't know how to reconcile it. But anyway, he had talked about he was going to have a job with the Teamsters, and he was going to do all this stuff. Meanwhile, he had no employment history whatsoever, that, at least according to the PSI, there was no employment history. So I don't know where he was going, but anyway, he was calm. And he said,
Go ahead.
I think you should give me probation, he said. And we did have, we talked about his criminal history, and it's just so much violence, and
Let me ask you some very specific
Sure.
questions. When Mr. Redden was speaking in court, did you observe any signs of impairment?
no,
Did you observe any signs of mental distress or disease or hallucinations or anything of that nature?
absolutely not.
Had you observed something to that effect, would it have been concerning to you?
Of course,
Are there times in which the court needs to jump in and say, hey, it's not appropriate to proceed today?
absolutely,
Here, did you see anything that caused you concern while Mr. Redden spoke?
not at all.
After Mr. Redden spoke, who spoke next?
Mr. Almasi,
And who was that?
his attorney, Caesar,
And was Mr. Almasi permitted to make a full argument to the court and ask for leniency and whatever he wanted?
he was,
And did he do so?
he did.
Now, in a moment, I want to play some video for you. Judge, with the court's permission, we've previously stipulated to 58. May I publish?
You may.
No, they should, no, they should be on already, but maybe the TV's went off. Somebody has. Oh, he has it, okay.
Before we get there, Judge, up until that point, district attorney speaks, Mr. Redden speaks, defense attorney speaks. Was everything proceeding as you expect a sentencing proceeding?
Yes,
Were there any signs at all that this was going to get out of control or violent?
no, it was actually completely contrary, because he was, like I said, calm and articulate, and he said, you know, this is what I'm doing. But at the same time, he said, but Judge, I understand you got to do what you think is right, and I understand that. So I mean, it was better than I would normally hope, I guess.
It's court's permission 58.
Okay.
3697. This is time stop for entry of judgment and position of sentence. Is there any legal cause or reason why judgment should not be pronounced against you at this time?
No, Judge.
That virtue be. 3697.
Is that your courtroom on January 3rd of 2024?
It is,
And is that your current courtroom?
it is,
As you look around this courtroom, is it set up a little bit differently than yours?
it is.
The folks that are on the right-hand side of the screen, do you know who they are?
Yeah. The
Who are they?
deputy DAs, Joey Scarborough and Richard Scow.
picture also on your screen?
It is.
Okay.
You can see that on your screen there, Judge?
I can.
The folks on the right, who are they?
The district attorneys, Richard Scow and Jory Scarborough.
And on the left,
Cesar Almasi.
is that the gentleman in the blue suit?
It is.
Who's that taller guy standing in the center of the room?
Shane Brandon, my marshal.
And is Shane Brandon, similar to Marshal Black, responsible for courtroom security?
He is.
Counsel, can I have you approach for a moment?
Judge, before we move on with the video, I want to follow up on a question I asked you earlier. You had mentioned PSI. What is that actually?
Pre-sentence investigation report.
And is that, as you described, several pages long, and it would give not only criminal history of an individual, but where they're from, their childhood, their background, their marital status, their health, and various other things.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a packet that is supposed to give you everything you need to sentence an individual appropriately.
Correct.
These individuals down here on the left, you can see at least one of them. Who are these folks?
Those are the other inmates.
And so they are in your courtroom, they're sitting where our jury is sitting today.
Correct.
And those are in custody defendants, is that right?
Right.
When a defendant shows up out of custody, do they sit back in the gallery area here?
They do.
And as you mentioned before, Mr. Redden was out of custody.
He was.
I'm going to resume the video.
This is time set for entry of judgment, imposition of sentence, or any legal cause or reason why judgment should not be pronounced against you at this time.
No, Judge.
Of virtue be pleaded guilty, I hereby judge you guilty of attempt battery with substantial bodily harm. My notes indicate the state retained the right to argue to the bench warrant, is that correct? Yes?
That is correct, Judge.
All right, state.
So based on the criminal history, Judge, let's see the PSI. I know you see all this, I don't need to rehash everything. My concerns are, there are crimes of violence.
Yep.
In the PSI, 3 felonies, 1 probation revoked. But you see on page 5, there are many probation violations or remands on probation on the discharge form. But I'm concerned based on the nature of criminal history, home invasions, batteries, battery domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon in this case that led to an attempt battery substantial. I think felony is appropriate, and I think a prison term would be appropriate.
Is there any restitution or victim impact?
No, Judge, not looking at today. So, but I do think prison is appropriate. I asked the court to impose 19 to 48 on this case based on the criminal history and the facts of this case.
Judge, could you hear that okay?
Uh-huh.
When the deputy district attorney asked for 19 to 48, just describe what that means in our
The attempt battery with substantial bodily harm that he was charged with could be treated either as a felony, where you could get 1 to 4 years in prison, or it could be treated as a gross misdemeanor. You get up to 364 days in the Clark County Detention Center. He was asking that it be treated as a felony, the 1 to 4, and he was asking for the maximum sentence under that felony, 19 to 48. It's 19 months to 48 months. Here in Nevada, you get a max and a minimum sentence, so you get the 48 months or the 4 years. The minimum is supposed to be a truth in sentencing to let you know how much you have to serve before you are eligible for parole. And that would be the 19 to 48. The minimum can't exceed 40% of the maximum, so truly the maximum minimum and the maximum in this case was 19 to 48 months.
Mr. Redden, is there anything you want to say on your own behalf before I pronounce sentence?
So basically, I would like to tell the courts and everyone here, like, based on my criminal history, like, I feel that, like, I shouldn't be, like, sent to prison for a second time.
Have you looked at your criminal history?
Have
you looked at your criminal history?
I actually just, I looked at it and gave
You lived it, I suppose.
I just looked at it, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know.
3 felonies, gross, 9 misdemeanors, multiple DVs. Got a lot going on, sir.
Yeah, I just figured, like.
Battery on a protected person, robberies. attempt home invasion. Go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you, I was just.
I just figure like I'm in a better place in my mind, my mental health. I have a support system. I just got hired as a teamster for, the union, making $20 an hour. And like the reason behind every single domestic violence, I've been dealing with mental health, and I didn't know that I was dealing with mental health. And they put me in mental health court, and I still didn't know that I had a mental health problem until it was August 2022 when I realized I have a problem with this. And like having a dictionary and like understanding myself, getting to know myself a little better, and applying it to my personality, and having an epiphany at that moment in those instances, and just like trying to learn from my mistakes, I feel like I shouldn't be sent to prison, but if it's appropriate for you, then you have to do what you have to do. But I figure that, if I'm in a better place in my life, I'm not doing drugs, I'm not out there committing crimes now, and I feel like I should be given a shot because I'm in a better place than I was then, so, but that's, I'm a person who never stops trying to do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. And I just, and I'm trying, and I never give up trying to do the right thing. I know I'm not a rebellious person. I don't want to be standing here. I don't want you to have to, sit up here and waste your time as well, but the criteria of me saying this is that I'm a person that never stops trying to do the right things, even if it's hard, and I did the best I could. I have mental problems, I guess.
Thank you. Mr. Omasi?
Judge, as contained in the pre-sentence investigation report, my client was diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And speaking with him, it certainly seems that he's following the pattern that this court has seen so many times of self-medication.
We've had 2 goes at mental health court, Mr. Omasi.
He did, and he does have 2 honorable discharge from probation. So he can do probation. He can be successful when supervised. It is true that he did get dishonorable discharge. He was revoked on a gross misdemeanor that he was being supervised for just very recently. But he is in a different position now. His foster mother, who is present as a show support, her name is Karen Springer, has provided him a place to live, which is listed on the PSI. His current address at 8 Rose Circle, Apartment A in North Las Vegas. And she very graciously has allowed him to stay there rent-free until he gets on his feet. Now, he is now part of Union 631 with Teamsters and is hoping to work his way through that program so that he can maintain work. He's also reached out to...
Up until this point, Your Honor, you have suggested a couple times that you're not buying the argument for probation. Is that fair?
Fair.
Did you just now observe Mr. Redden move his body position a bit?
Yes.
Did you notice that back then?
No.
Shannon West for any job prospects that are available.
You seeing that now?
I am.
Is it common for a judge and her marshal to have a bit of an unspoken language that goes on when you're sentencing people?
Yes.
You work closely with your marshal?
Very.
And those cues that you've given in court, do they have a bit of a purpose?
They do.
What is that?
So he can get ready for a remand.
And a remand means putting cuffs on someone.
Taking somebody out of custody and putting him in custody.
I'm going to resume the video.
Through them. Finally, Judge, it's not just his mental health that he's been contending with, but he also has a history of IEP in his education. And at 30 years old, he does not have a high school degree. And so we spoke about that as well, and I think it's high time that he did that. I think the court can trust that he is going to perform well on probation. I think he's worth this risk. If the court wants to be 19 to 48 as suggested by the VA, I would have no issue with that, but it's suspended rather than just sending him to prison for any length of time. I think it makes more sense given the circumstances and his ability to do probation successfully that he be given this opportunity.
I appreciate that, but I think it's time that he get a taste of something else because I just can't with that history. In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada.
All right, before we let that play, Judge, I want you to do your best to walk us through what happens next from your method.
I remember him coming at me and really didn't think that he would ever make contact. And then I just remember, it was like a crash sound. I just remember smashing into the wall. I went down, my glasses went up, I smashed into the wall. He was on me, and then I was being pulled down. I was being hit and I don't know where and by what. I had closed my eyes. I was trying to protect my face and my head. He had me by the hair, and I was still getting hit in the head. In the meantime, I saw my law clerk who was sitting next to me, who had dove almost in front of me as Mr. Redden came at me. And he was on top trying to pry the defendant off me. By this point, I had pulled down, I was kind of laying down like in the back of the bench. I had gone my head from this side to this side. And I just remember saying, help, help, somebody get him off. I mean, in my head, I was completely defenseless. He was so determined and so violent and so, it was scary. I didn't think I was going to get out of there.
I'll give you a moment, I want to play a little more video. Back up a little bit.
Don't do this.
Please, please, wow! Please, please, please!
Is she okay?
Why are you doing that? Wow!
Hey.
Wow!
Hey, can you fucking radio somebody? Fucking radio somebody! What?
Can you do your best to describe the level of force you used when you were under the bench and we can't see in the video?
The level of force he used the entire time was superhuman. I don't know. From the time he came through the air and smashed into me, he knocked me literally almost through the wall, out of my chair. He knocked me so hard, he knocked me out of my shoes. You know, when you see a car accident and people get hit so hard by a car, their shoes come off. I mean, that's how hard he hit me. And when I was down there, it didn't get less.
We saw there a couple of individuals jump in, one of them being your law clerk.
Yes.
Well, if you remember, if you know, while your law clerk was trying to save you, was Mr. Redden stopped?
He was not.
Can you describe that? What was going on physically and how?
Only by feel. Because
Do your best.
I was down in the ground and I could just feel someone going at me who was Mr. Redden, because that's where he was, and I could feel someone trying to pull him off and leave her alone, and you know, like they're fighting over me. I mean, Michael's trying to pull him off, and he's not letting go.
Do you know, based on memory, where his hands were?
I do not.
Do you remember being struck or hitting your head while you were down behind the bench there?
Yes.
Do you remember what struck you?
I do not.
Do you remember what side of your head was?
Left at that point.
Did Mr. Redden continue to attack you while Mr. Lasso was pulling you?
He did.
At some point, Mr. Lasso and the others are successful in getting him physically off you. Is that right?
3 of them. 3 or 4 of them it took to get him off me.
Where did you go, or what did you do once they were able to?
As soon as I was clear enough, I literally rolled onto my bench in fetal position.
I would presume that this was extremely traumatic for you, but I have to ask, do you know if you went unconscious during the attack?
I don't know.
What is the next thing you remember after rolling into the fetal position under the bench?
I remember thinking, why is it taking so long? I mean, there was chaos in the courtroom, there was screaming, the alarms were going off, and there was still a struggle. Again, I couldn't see it. Partly my eyes were closed, and partly it was out of my sight. And so I was just laying there and waiting, and then the next thing I remember is Jory coming up, is she okay? And Michael came up earlier, Michael Lasso, my law clerk, and kind of stood by me, kind of, are you okay? And also, at least the feeling I got was that he was the buffer in case they lost control of the defendant again, because he was still very close.
While the attack was actually going on, what was going through your head?
I'm not going to get out of here. And it's a weird thing, is I know that there's video, and there's a part of me going, I'll be dead. But I have 3 kids. They're gonna watch. And that's what they're gonna see. That's what was making me so mad. Not what he was doing to me, but what he was doing to my family. Okay.
Take your time. So, alarms are going off, lots of physical chaos going on. Did you look around? Eventually were you able to get up and look around the courtroom?
Yeah.
What do you recall seeing there?
Well, behind the bench, there was blood everywhere.
Where did that come from, if you know?
Shane, my marshal,
Did you look at Shane?
I did.
What did you see?
His forehead was literally sliced open, and the skin had been just flapping as he was trying to protect me, even though he was hurt, but he was getting blood all over the bench. There was clumps of my hair on the floor. The calendar papers were all covered in blood.
Eventually is, what I'll call the scene, is it all secured and Mr. Redden taken away?
Yes.
I'm gonna resume the video here for a moment. Can we turn that down just a little bit?
Hey, where's Mary Kay?
She's right here, she's right here.
Stay down, get on the ground. Oh, shit! Damn! Fucking asshole. Give me the ring. Where it should be. Hey, my man. Calm down. Hey, you come here. I'll take care of it. That's my guy. Come around. You hold in. That's my guy. Come around. That's my guy right there. Yo, Kelly, is medical coming? Is medical coming? Yeah, medical. Yeah, we need medical. Judge, you okay? This fucking ass out. We got to get him. Yeah? Hold it. Hey, you coming? What happened? What happened? What? Are you okay? Good. Medical's coming. Come here. Come here. He's laughing. Come here. Yes. We're not going to forget his laughing. Are you all right? Sit down, man. This fucking guy.
Judge, did you see yourself finally getting up there?
I did.
I believe previously you said you don't know if you went unconscious or not.
Correct.
Do you remember getting up and trying to walk where there's no exit?
Well, I remember because I've seen the video. I mean,
Okay.
I
You have no independent recollection of trying to get out of the courtroom by going over the other side of the bench?
no.
She hit her head, bro. She hit her head. She hit her head hard.
What are you looking for?
Shoe.
Once you are cleared from the courtroom, can I presume that there was an investigation that ensued?
Yes.
Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department detectives come down and document the scene.
I don't know who documented the scene. By then, we were in the back. AMR came and medical was clearing everybody and taking Shane out and stuff.
Eventually, you give a recorded statement like any witness to a crime or victim of a crime.
I did.
And can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the injuries you sustained, if any?
Obviously, I hit my head. I did my family didn't want me driving, so my daughter drove me home, and then they insisted that I go to the hospital and get a scan to make sure I woke up in the morning because it looked pretty scary. The scan was okay, but obviously I had a headache for a few days. The spots where he pulled out my hair, you know how when you get your hair pulled out, it's sore for a while. That was sore for a few days. My arm, my back, everything was stiff, like, you know, you get jostled around. The next day, the worst part for me the next day was my neck. I don't know what it was. I don't know. All I know is I literally, during the day, was holding my head up, like, with two hands because my neck was so sore and so tired. It just hurt. My tailbone, that hurt for weeks. If you ever bruise your tailbone, that just doesn't go away right away. And I was walking older than my age for a while. I couldn't get back on the treadmill for 2 or 3 weeks. And when I say back on the treadmill, that means I walk on it. It's nothing. But I couldn't even walk on the treadmill for a couple of weeks. And then it was several months before I could lay on my left arm. I couldn't sleep on it. That was.
What type of injury did you have on your left arm?
That's what took, I think, the bulk of the initial hit. Again, I don't know what it was that hit me there, but I still have, it's been how long now, and there's a round, it's not horribly disfiguring, but it's a definite, you can still see a round, raised, bruised, fleshy, something not like the rest of it, marking where he made contact with me that day. But it took me months before I could sleep on my left side again.
In the days following the attack, were you photographed, and did you also, you and your family members, take photos of your injuries as they progressed?
We did.
Were there several times in the following days where you lost large clumps of hair?
Yes.
I have to ask for the record, ma'am, how old are you?
63 now.
And you would have been 62 at the time of the
I
incident?
was.
All right, thank you very much. I'll pass it over to Judge.
Okay, Cross.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Arnold.
Your Honor, isn't it true that you didn't have any bruises as a result of this attack?
No?
And
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What was your answer?
No.
And isn't it true, Your Honor, that you didn't suffer any bleeding as a result of this attack?
That's true.
And isn't it true that you had no broken bones as a result of this attack?
That's also true.
And in regards to your neck, you didn't have any bruising on your neck, isn't that true?
True.
Isn't it true that you didn't know how many times, if any, that Mr. Redden hit you with a fist?
True.
In fact, you don't know for sure if Mr. Redden hit you with a fist or if you were kneed or anything like that.
True. After the obvious initial.
Correct. And let's make that clear for the record. So when you say after the obvious initial, I'm not talking about the leap, but when you're actually on the floor, you don't know if you were being struck by Mr. Redden with his feet, his fists, or anything like that.
Correct. Just that I'm being hit.
Just that you were being hit. And were you covered up? Was your face covered up at the time?
I'm going to assume so. I mean,
Prior to him jumping over the bench, you didn't see him with anything in his hand?
no.
And you didn't see during the attack him having anything in his hand?
No.
You know, you're asking it in the negative, the last two questions, Mr. Arnold, and I'm afraid that'll come across in the transcript as a double negative. Could you re-ask those questions? I just want to make sure you're getting the meaning that you want.
Yes, Your Honor. So isn't it true that you didn't see anything in his hand?
Yes.
And isn't it true that during the attack, when you're on the floor, you didn't see anything in his hand that he was attacking you with?
Also true.
I'm going to shift gears here and talk about the PSI. In regards to the PSI, you reviewed it.
I did.
And did you, was there a section that you recall in regards to his mental illness?
Yes.
And you were aware that he had suffered from, he had a previous mental illness history, is that correct?
Correct.
And do you recall, was it paranoia and schizophrenia?
I remember schizophrenia. I don't remember what else.
Did you have any concerns going into the actual sentencing hearing about his competency?
No,
Did you make any inquiries to Mr. Malsey, his defense attorney, in regards to his competency prior to proceeding with sentencing?
I did not. If I recall, the mental health history was fairly long ago about his diagnosis of schizophrenia, and that he had gotten some treatment and then he was not on medication. He had graduated from mental health court, and according to him, he didn't feel like his mental health was causing him any issues. That was kind of the summary of the mental health issues as I understood them from his PSI.
Right.
And then coupling that, normally it would be, the defense attorney would be the one to bring it to my attention that there's a competency issue if it wasn't obvious.
Right.
And then that coupled with his appearance in court didn't give me any cause for pause.
Did you note, or was it brought to your attention through your review of the PSI, that on your case, prior to it proceeding to district court, that he was found to be incompetent?
Don't recall he was found to be incompetent. I recall he was referred to competency court, but I don't recall the findings.
Okay. And do you know, after he was referred to competency court, how long did the case languish prior to you receiving a guilty plea in the case?
I don't know.
And again, you weren't aware or made aware by anyone that he was supposed to be on medication at the time of his sentencing?
I was not.
Just check my notes real quick. Was he saying anything to you that you recall when he was on top of you?
I don't recall.
Do you recall if you heard any statements that he said that he was trying to kill you?
I don't recall.
Do you recall anything that was being said to you by Mr. Redden?
I do not. It was literally chaos.
And again, all the blows that you said that you felt to your head, you don't know who gave those blows, number one. Is that correct?
I mean,
You're assuming that it was Mr.
Michael
Redden.
Jury and Richard literally were pulling him off me, saving my life.
Okay.
But for them, I'm not here. But no, I guess theoretically, my law clerk could have punched me in the head.
Well, you said that you experienced blows to your head. Is
I
that
did.
correct? And so, again, there's a huge scuffle and they're trying to get him off of you.
True.
And so you don't know what part of anyone's body that actually landed on your head that could have caused injury.
Eventually, but initially, he was the only one near there.
Right.
Could have, yes.
And do you recall also that when you gave your voluntary statement, that you stated that you were only struck in the head once?
I don't recall. If I said that, I do.
Okay. And
And I don't think I've ever said, there was the initial and then there was a second.
Okay, I'm going to approach page 7. May I approach to refresh your recollection?
Sure.
I did it again, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Just where I have it highlighted.
We have started me?
Yeah, just read in between that.
You want me to read it to you?
No,
Want me to
just
read it myself?
read it and refresh your recollection. You know the drill. Then I'll ask questions.
Can I keep that?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
And so, based upon your review of the voluntary statement, do you recall how you were hit?
Same thing. I don't know if it was head or elbow, head, hand. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
And you don't
I was
know-
hit, but I don't know with what.
Right, and you don't know how many times you were
I
hit?
don't.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Redirect.
I'll be brief, Judge. You gave a voluntary statement to police that was recorded.
Yes,
Subsequent to that, you testified at a prior court proceeding.
yes,
And throughout that, you've been consistent that you don't remember how many times you were hit.
yes.
In fact, as you sit here today, you can't tell the jury if you were knocked out or
No?
not. Mr.
Well,
Arnold,
I think you might have a double negative as well. Could you re-ask that question?
do you know if you were knocked out?
No? I mean, no.
May I approach?
Yes.
There was a question or a line of questioning about whether you sustained bruising. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
Showing you now 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33. Are those documentation of your bruising
Yes.
after the incident? And these will be available to the jury. These are already admitted, Judge, so these will be available to the jury. I'm not going to put them up on the record. When you described this attack initially, I asked you about the level of force that was used. And I want you to do your best to describe the level of force used and why it is you don't remember how many times you were hit.
I was hit so hard between the defendant's body and behind my bench. It's a marble wall, and so, like I said, I was hit so hard that I literally smashed into it. And then I was, at best, dazed, and I was pulled down behind me, and he continued going after me so forcefully and so violently that literally 3 or 4 healthy, strong young men couldn't get him off of me. It was so strong. They saved my life. I tell them that all the time. You guys saved my life.
As that was happening, do you recall a hand on your neck?
I remember being held. No, not clearly, no.
Fair enough. You're doing your best to recall the events as you remember. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
I do know I lost hair, a lot of hair from that side.
Thank you.
Any recross?
Yes, just real quick. And, Your Honor, in regards to the bruising, the pictures that you were just shown, those were pictures in regards to bruising on your shoulder, your arms, and your legs and tailbone. Is that correct?
Well, you don't have a picture of my tailbone, but
Oh, your back area.
my lower half, my
Right.
shoulder, and my upper arm, yeah.
Okay. And there was no bruising to the face, and there was no bruising to your neck. You have to say,
As there was no bruising, and she's saying no.
but we have to get it verbally, and I'll start it over again.
There was no bruising to my neck,
There was no bruising
that I'm aware of, yeah.
to your neck, and there was no bruising to your face.
No,
That's correct?
that's correct. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's all right.
All right.
I just want to make sure the transcript reads the way that you guys want it to read, that's all.
Right. All right. No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, can we step down?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you currently employed?
I'm sorry?
How are you currently employed?
Right now I'm a law clerk, so I'm law clerk for the Honorable Judge Mary Kay Holthus.
And did you just see Ms. Holthus leave the courtroom?
I did.
How long have you been her law clerk?
I've been a law clerk basically a year now, maybe a year and 1 month. So August 2023 is when I first took the job, and right now I'm scheduled to be there till August 2025.
You've known her much longer than
Yes,
a little over a
yeah.
year, correct?
I've known her a long time. She's really a family friend. I kind of know her children very well. Almost grew up together, so yeah, I've known her a long time. That's how I got lucky enough to kind of be able to work with her. And since we're working with her, I see her in a whole new light now. A lot of respect for her.
How long have you known her?
Man, probably since I was 8 years old. So maybe 11 years, just about.
How
8 years old?
Yeah.
11? I'm just, are you 19 years old?
Oh, no, wait a minute. Oh, my God. I'm like, wait. I'm actually not good at math. That's why I'm a law clerk. So, man, has it really been that long? Because I'm 27 now. So, 21 years? Wow. Or, no.
19.
Oh, no. It's a long time.
Okay, so you've known her for 19 years.
Yeah.
And that's how you became her law clerk?
Yeah, pretty much. That's how I became a law clerk. I guess I got a good recommendation, so I was able to get the job.
What does a law clerk do?
Law clerk basically kind of just does whatever the judge needs. I mean, I do a lot of briefing for her. I'm almost the middleman in between the judge and anyone else, like attorneys. So anyone that wants to contact the judge, anyone wants to speak with her, anyone that files a motion, anything like that, I'm the middleman in between. So I'm looking at all the motions, I'm speaking to all the attorneys, I'm kind of coordinating everything. I brief all the motions for the judge, kind of give her a heads up. And sometimes it's as simple as, just giving her a cup of coffee.
Do you also accompany her to her calendars?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Every calendar, I sit directly next to the judge, kind of on the left side of her, and we have a split docket, so we have criminal and civil, so I'm just kind of on that left side, almost where this monitor is, and I'll kind of be right here, and the judge will be right there. She has her own monitors, and I have kind of my own computer, and I'm directly next to the judge for every calendar.
And when the calendar is occurring, what are you doing while you're seated next to her?
It depends. I'm usually checking my emails. I'll also keep going along with whatever, whatever matter is up. So, maybe if it's a criminal matter, I kind of pull up that entire file. If there's anything the judge quickly needs printed, or maybe it's a police report or anything like that, I kind of right there. I have a printer there. I can print anything she needs. Or sometimes I need to run to the back, get her something that she needs, maybe make a copy. Basically anything at all, just to make sure the calendar runs smooth.
Okay. And what days does she hear her criminal calendar?
She hears a criminal calendar on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then Tuesdays are civil.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the courtroom that she presides in is set up very differently from the courtroom we're currently in?
Oh, absolutely. Much different. This is a much bigger courtroom, but the defense and plaintiff desks are much further away. I would say these are a lot closer than the ones that are in her courtroom.
Okay. I'm going to show you some photographs of your courtroom.
Sure.
So that you can help explain the layout for us. I'm showing you on the overhead what's been admitted as States 2. Could I get it flipped over, please?
Judge, you might take away, I think the light is hitting.
Your Honor, I can't see yet, sorry. I couldn't see the monitor, was taking a minute to turn on.
You can pull up the lamps.
Yeah, pull up the lamps, just tab.
I might turn them off. There we go.
There it goes.
Okay, Mr. Lasso, this is States Exhibit 2, for the record. These tables right here that we see, who typically stands right there?
So usually the defense.
During a calendar.
Yeah, usually the defense stays there, and then on the other side, that opposite desk is where the DA or the state, whoever's representing the state that day, maybe it's an AG, will be sitting over there.
And then,
We do have a mouse there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, where did the defense sit?
So defense would be right here, typically like right here. Maybe the attorney would be next to him, and then on the other side here, kind of where that mouse is, that other desk is where the state would be.
okay. And then, is there also an area where the court staff, such as a court clerk and a court reporter, sit?
Yeah, it would be. I don't know what's going on here. That would be like right here. So this is where our court clerks are. This is where our court recorder would be, kind of like right here. That's our monitor. That's where the judge is. And then on that right side, that monitor is my monitor right there. And then to the right of that is actually where that little monitor is the witness stand. So usually during criminal calendar, we have a correctional officer that would sit there.
And was there a correctional officer sitting there on January 3rd of 2024?
Yes, there was.
What is the difference between a court clerk and a law clerk?
There's a big difference. The law clerk is usually has a legal degree, so we're briefing actually the law that's involved in the motion. So we're looking up the case law, making sure it's still good, reliable. Kind of briefing those, telling judge, giving her recommendations as to what she should do, what she shouldn't do. Whereas the court clerk is also a middleman in between the judge, but at the same time they just kind of handle just different areas. They're not really involved in any legal advising or aspect of it. I would say more just kind of coordination, handling minutes, the court minutes, things like that. So just kind of a little different.
Okay. And then the court recorder, you said you guys have a recorder in that department,
Yeah,
correct?
and that one right there. So this one, that monitor, you kind of see it's light. That would be for the court clerk, and then to the left side would be the court recorder.
Okay. And with regards to that courtroom, is there actually an entrance behind that tile wall that we can see?
Yes. So that's where the judge and me, that's where we usually enter, along with the entire court staff, really. We all kind of enter in through that door. Her chambers would be right behind there. So we kind of come in through this right side way. Then I take my seat right there, judge will sit right there, and then the rest of the court staff will take their place.
And then moving on to States 3. Oops, let me take this one off. What are we looking at here?
So this is kind of just a seating area. Usually people who are supporting the defense or the defendant would be sitting in his back area, but it really could be anyone. So that desk right here is the defense desk, kind of just the opposite angle. Or I'm sorry, the state's desk. I'm sorry. So this would be usually anyone that on behalf of the state sits right here. And this would be, like I said, where the DA or the state would be. And then that opposite side is where the defense is. So this would be where any defendant would be, their attorney. Usually it's a PD. And then, like I said, this is usually where family members will sit, supporters, friends, anything like that.
And do you see another exit in this photograph?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it would be right here in this photograph. This is an exit also to that chamber hallway where there's a lot of different chambers and offices, things like that.
So staff and sometimes attorneys might use that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a copier machine, so sometimes when I have to run and go make copies, I'll kind of run through that backside. And occasionally I'll come through that door, but usually not. But right behind there's like a big copy machine and jury rooms for deliberation.
But generally speaking, the public would not use that?
No, no.
And then showing you...
I think you've got another double negative there. Does the public use those doors?
Not that specific one, no. And the one behind the judge, no, never.
Okay.
Showing you states 4 on the overhead.
Mm-hmm.
Is this, does this appear to be a photograph taken from the area where the juror box was in the previous photograph?
Absolutely, yeah. This is that angle, kind of where that door would be, and so this is where like the jury would sit. This is where like occasionally witnesses will come up and maybe a victim statement would be given, or attorneys will go up there and make an argument. This is where the state would be, and that was kind of where that previous photo was taken. Would be back here for friends and family. And then this door is kind of where a holding cell is, and then also where defendants during our criminal calendars. That's where they will walk those defendants through that door. And then to the right side is where our recorder would sit, and then this is the court clerk here.
Okay, and when you say defendants, do you mean in custody defendants?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then showing you states 5. What is this?
So this is kind of the angle from the recorder and our court clerk. So this was kind of that long desk here, and this is facing the jury box. So kind of where that last picture was taken would be right here, and then this is that door that leads to the copier. So then you can kind of go through there, but typically there wouldn't be public that'd be going through there. Occasionally attorneys do, but yeah, this is just kind of that opposite angle. And then to the right side here would be like the defense table where usually PDs sit or defendants that are out of custody.
Showing you state 6. What are we looking at here?
This is the view from the court clerk's angle here. So this is where the judge would sit. This is my monitor right here. Literally right where that picture is being taken, it would be exactly like the angle from the court clerk. And then this right here would be the witness stand. It's kind of like right here. Then we have a TV there, then that's that same door, obviously the jury box. And then when we have criminal calendars, instead of a jury there would be the in-custody defendants would all be kind of taking up that area.
Okay. If you could look right here for me, where my finger is.
Yeah.
Is that essentially like a wall between where the judge sits and the court clerk?
Yes, it's a full wall. There's no kind of opening that you can go through there. Kind of the only access point to that chair that you're saying where the judge would sit is through that right side. So you have to go through that right side. There's kind of like maybe 2 steps that you go around and yeah, right there. There's kind of 2 steps that you would go around. And that's the only way to get over there. Unless you were to hop over this little wall there, you can't really get to that side of there's no access to it essentially.
Okay, so this would be the door that you'd walk through to get to the
Yeah, it kind
area
of
where you
swings around. Yeah.
Okay. Showing you state 7.
And then from right here, this is the view from the judge, kind of where the judge sits. That's a microphone right here, and there's a little sign too that'll say like always recording. That's right there. And this is her view. That right there, that monitor would again be where an out of custody defendant would be, along with a PD or whoever their attorney would be. This side would be usually typically filled up on criminal days with defendants. The in custody ones, and then on the right side would be where the DA or the state representative would be.
And kind of like the equipment where I'm standing, there's an Elmo there?
Absolutely, yeah, just like that. And attorneys will walk up, they'll give arguments, and that main door right there is the access point for the public or attorneys that are going into the courtroom that day. Anyone that's essentially not a courtroom staff member is typically walking through that main door there.
And you're talking about the 2 double doors?
Correct, yeah.
Hey, we're starting to talk over each other, so why don't we make sure she gets her question out, and then counsel make sure he gets his answer out, okay?
Showing you states 8. What are we looking at here?
This is kind of my view, even though that's not necessarily my chair, that's the judge's chair. I'm just kind of turned to the side, but this is my angle. This is my monitor right here, and this is kind of the view if you were to stand up in that little room section that's blocked off. This right here is that wall area that we were talking about earlier that's completely closed off. That's the court clerks right here in the recorder, and this is, like I said, my monitor, so this is kind of would be my view.
Okay, and I'm going to zoom in on something really quickly here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the red and green buttons right there?
Yeah, I do.
What are those?
I'm not exactly sure what they are. I think they're panic buttons or silent alarm. I'm not exactly sure. Or they may be. I know there are certain buttons that lock the courtroom doors. It could be those, but I'm not exactly sure on what those are. I've never really had to use them.
Okay. Showing you states 9. What is this?
So this is kind of the angle that you would see if you were, like, let's say a defendant walking through that door that in custodies, almost where that holding cell is. So once you walk out, if you were to just look left, this is the angle you would see. This is that door that I was talking about earlier that leads to like chambers and offices and things like that. And then if you see on the right side, if you were to loop around, that is how we would walk up to where we would be sitting, me and the judge. But this is just kind of that angle there. This chair to the bottom side, this is like typically an extern may sit there, but it's usually either an officer or no one sitting there.
Thank you. Showing you states 10. What are we looking at in this photograph?
Yeah, this would be the witness stand. This is just so there's a monitor similar to how it is here, where anything that's being shown on the Elmo could be seen by the witness. That would be the judge's chair right here. That's the judge's monitor. That would be my monitor. There's typically 2 chairs up here, so I would have a much smaller chair right there. And this is that door that we would enter through. This is kind of that one access point, the wraparound. And this is kind of like just a granite wall that we have that sits behind the judge.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I may have missed it. You may have already answered this
Yeah.
question. Right here, is there any way to access the area where the judge sits other than to climb over that wall?
No. These doors, those aren't doors. It's like a wall almost.
And just like in here, the witness stand is lower than where the judge sits?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
In the back hallway that you've referred to, that staff and in particular you and judge would use to get to the courtroom, are there exits to the ground floor? Like, are there stairs back there?
Like in that backside to go down?
Like in the rear hallway?
Yes, yeah, there are. If you were to walk out of that door I was talking about near the copier, if you were to just turn around, there is a big door right there where there's a stairwell, and you could go down. I'll often use that stairwell to go down to like a little supply office to get some extra Sharpies or whatever I need or whatever the judge needs.
What about elevators? Are there elevators in the rear?
Yes, there's elevators. Instead of making a right, if you were to just make a left, there's elevators right there as soon as you were to walk out. And then there's also, if further down the hall, another pair of elevators as well.
Thank you. Showing you states 11. What are we looking at in this photograph?
So this is the angle from the witness stand. That's that monitor that I was saying that's similar to this one here. That's the microphone. That's those doors for the public to go through. And this is just kind of that angle if you were to be sitting at the witness stand.
And you indicated that on January 3rd there was a correctional officer sitting right there?
Yes.
Showing you states 12. Does this appear to be a photograph of Judge Holthus's bench?
Yes, absolutely. That's just right. She'd be sitting right on top of there, and then I'd be on that right side.
And there's a bit of a glare in this photograph, but is there a nameplate there too?
Yes, and it says Honorable Judge Mary Kay Holthus.
Showing you states 13. Is this a close-up of that
That is it right there.
nameplate? Mm-hmm. And it says Judge Mary Kay Holthus?
Yes.
Showing you states 14. Does this appear to be the desk or counter area in the judge's bench area and where you sit?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'd be on that right side where this monitor is. This is that kind of wall that cuts off between where the judge would sit and then the court clerk on that left side. Again, this is the judge's monitor, and then this is kind of that front view and that nameplate that we were just discussing.
Showing you states 15. What is this?
So this is once you were to walk out that door between kind of like the chambers and those offices, kind of where the whole court clerks and the entire court staff essentially walks through. If you weren't going down that long hallway that we discussed earlier where the court clerk and recorder sits, this would be making a left. So this is how me and the judge, this is the only access area to that little kind of sitting area where the judge would be and then myself. So every time that we go into court, whether it's for a trial or a calendar, we go through this area. That door that's closed right now is usually open, and we just kind of walk through. There's kind of like 2 steps, and you just walk up, we make a right, and then I'd be sitting right on this right side here, and then the judge would be kind of right here.
Okay. And going back to 19, this is the door that you're referring to, correct?
Exactly, yes.
That you and judge enter into?
Yes.
Are there cameras in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the DAVS system?
Yes.
Is that one of the recording systems in the courtroom?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not the system will kind of alternate between various cameras in the courtroom?
Absolutely, yeah. Depending on whatever the mic picks up, it'll usually could change from the witness stand to the judge and also whoever's speaking, whether it's an attorney or a defendant or kind of whoever's on that other side where the desks are.
So it's activated by noise?
Absolutely.
And JAVS, what does that stand for?
That I don't know. I don't know what JAV stands for exactly. But I know, just kind of the recording system that can catch whatever's going on. And if like we need to look back or like if the court clerks are making their minutes, they'll typically go back and watch the JAVs to hear exactly what attorneys were saying or the judge, so that way they can get an accurate depiction of what had happened and occurred during court.
And
That's, by the way, JAVS is Jefferson Audio Visual System. Just an FYI.
thank you. Learn something new every day. Is there also a fixed camera in the courtroom? Do you know?
Yeah, I believe there is. Yes.
And do you know approximately where in the courtroom it's mounted?
I believe it's You know, I don't exactly know for sure, so I don't, you know, I'm pretty sure it's kind of right behind us looking at the entire courtroom, but I don't know for certain, but I know there is one that kind of looks down, but I think that will partly be activated by the jabs as well.
Is jabs always running during the course of the criminal calendar?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Now, to go to January 3rd of 2024. On that date, you were not originally supposed to be working, correct?
Correct.
Were you supposed to have the day off?
I mean, I don't know if I was supposed to have the day off, but that morning I woke up and I was actually studying for the bar at that time. The bar was taking place in February, so this was January 3rd. It was kind of our first, it was right after New Year's, so it was our first criminal calendar of the year, and actually our only criminal calendar that week. So, and it was on a Wednesday, so my boss had texted me, one of the core staffs, and said, hey, why don't you take the day off? You know, it's not that long of a calendar. You know, why don't you study? It's coming up here pretty soon. It's a pretty stressful exam, so, you know, you can go ahead and just take the day to study. And for whatever reason, I just really wanted to be there. I wanted to, you know, it was our only criminal calendar that week, and it was just something that, I don't know, I felt like I just should be at. So I told her thank you, but instead I decided to go into work that day.
And on that date, did you sit next to the judge like you would during any other calendar?
Absolutely.
Were you multitasking like you indicated you typically do?
Yeah. You know, I prepped the files that day, kind of started off as any other, and during calendar, I remember just going through emails, you know, checking to see if there's any updates. Sometimes attorneys will email you right during calendar, so just kind of checking to make sure everything was running smoothly.
During a typical criminal calendar, I know you indicated that there was at least one correctional officer seated in the witness stand in the courtroom.
Yes.
Are there typically more than one correctional officer?
There usually is. Sometimes there's only one. We always have our marshal there as well, but especially if it's like a lot of defendants that are in custody coming in, there will be maybe 2 correctional officers, occasionally 3, but usually, like I said, you'll have the one, you'll always have the marshal there as well.
Are there times when the correctional officers who are present in the courtroom might remove some of the in-custody defendants and take them back to the Clark County Detention Center?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially if there's a lot of defendants in a particular day, or maybe if there's like some sort of intermission or break, whatever ones we've kind of gotten through the in-custodies, they'll go ahead and kind of uncuff whoever together or whoever hasn't gone, and then they'll go and walk those individuals through that door that we were talking about and then on to CCDC.
But there will always be at least one correctional officer in the courtroom if there are in-custody defendants,
Yes.
correct?
Oh, yeah.
And you indicated that there's also a court-martial that's in the courtroom during criminal calendars?
Always, yeah.
And is that Marshal Shane Brandon in your courtroom?
Yes, it is.
And typically, how is he dressed?
In full uniform. He's got, you know, a vest on, and he looks almost like a police officer. It's like a brown tan shirt that he has, and he's got a vest. He's got a full belt. He's got a gun on him. He's got a badge, everything like that.
With regards to the correctional officers that are in the courtroom, are they typically dressed in uniform?
Oh, yes. Yeah, almost identical to the marshal.
Readily identifiable as law enforcement officers?
Yes, absolutely.
Are they typically armed?
Yes.
With a firearm?
Yes.
On January 3rd of 2024, do you recall a defendant being on your calendar that day by the name of Deobra Redden?
Yes, I do.
Do you see that individual in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please point to him and identify an article of clothing that he's wearing today?
Sure. That's him right there, wearing, looks like, I can't really see the color of the tie, almost like a purple tie, blue shirt, standing up right there.
May the record reflect that he's identified the defendant, Your Honor.
Let the record so reflect.
Now, with regards to Mr. Redden on January 3rd of 2024, were you aware of whether or not he'd ever been in your department prior to that date?
Yes.
Was he or was he not?
He was, yeah.
And do you recall what he had been in your department for previously?
Exactly, I'm not sure. I believe, I don't want the record to be wrong here. I believe it was a domestic violent offense, if I remember correctly.
Do you know what kind of hearing it was? Sorry.
The kind of hearing that he was there originally for, or that
Previously.
day?
Previously.
It was a sentencing hearing. We would, I believe, give him probation.
Okay. And there was nothing particularly remarkable about that hearing, correct?
Nothing remarkable at all.
Were you aware on January 3rd of 2024 when his case was called? Were you paying attention?
Yes, I was absolutely paying attention. I remember him kind of getting walked through by our marshal. When there's an out-of-custody defendant, whether it's a sentencing or really any hearing whatsoever, we always have a marshal directly behind him. It's typically Shane, who's directly behind that particular defendant, whatever it is. And I remember him coming into the courtroom, and I remember him kind of talking for a long time. The judge had given him an opportunity to address the court. And I remember at that point, you know, I mean, there was really nothing unusual. He seemed really polite and courteous, and there was no kind of nothing unique about the situation. So I kind of had lost interest a little bit. I was, you know, doing my emails. It wasn't really, like I said, anything unique about the situation. And I, you know, I kind of, like I said, I kind of just started answering emails.
Prior to Mr. Redden addressing the court on his own behalf, do you recall whether or not anyone from the state made an argument on behalf of the state?
I think, I can't
Were you paying attention at that point?
Yeah, I don't necessarily recall. I mean, I think the state may have, but I don't necessarily recall exactly what, kind of right before. Like I said, I was kind of answering emails and stuff, and I didn't think anything of it.
Do you recall who the calendar deputy was that day?
The calendar deputy?
Who was handling the calendar on behalf of the state? On January 3rd.
State, it was, there was Jory, I know was there. I know Richard Scow was there. I think it was Scow at the time, because Jory would kind of pop in from time to time. So I think it was Scow.
Okay. And with regards to a calendar deputy, is that the individual that would handle the bulk of the matters on the criminal calendar that day?
Exactly, yes, yeah.
And occasionally specialty team deputies might pop in and out to handle individual matters?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So on that date, Richard Scow was the assigned calendar deputy?
Yes.
And Jory Scarborough was a specialty team deputy that appeared on
Yes.
January 3rd? At some point after Mr. Redden addressed the court, do you recall something unusual happening?
Oh yeah. So like I said, I was kind of lost. I didn't lose interest, but I was kind of listening, but I wasn't paying too much attention. I was just kind of answering emails, and then I could hear. I remember the judge speaking. I remember the judge kind of going and kind of saying what she was going to say, and then I could remember hearing some handcuffs. And then what really caught my attention was I heard, excuse my language, but I heard, fuck that bitch. And when I heard that, I immediately looked up. And when then I'd seen Mr. Redden, and I'd seen him kind of hop over the defense desk that we were speaking about earlier. And he kind of put one hand down, and it just kind of pretty easily just hopped right over. And at that moment, I was obviously my full attention was looking at this particular individual. And at that moment in time, I actually thought he was going to go for the door because occasionally when we go to remand defendants into custody, they'll go and make a run for it. And there was that particular door that we were speaking about earlier. So I actually was under the impression he was going for the door. Never would I even imagine that he was going to go for the judge. But then I remember looking at him. I was actually saying like, whoa, 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 because I was trying to like process what was even happening. And it all happened so fast. I mean, like I was saying before, the defense desk is actually a lot further than these desks are here. And he was able to scale that distance in such a short amount of time. I mean, the video doesn't even do it justice as to just how fast that all took place. And then I remember him doing this just incredible leap over the judge's bench bar there. And at that moment in time, I kind of just reacted. I wasn't even thinking, to be honest. It was just all reaction and a reflex. I went right in to try my best to kind of to protect the judge. So, no hesitation. I tried my best to go in. And at that point, unfortunately, he was so fast and kind of just athletic. He was able to get to her. And I remember him kind of sprawling his arms out like this and just clamping those arms down. And one kind of right on her hair here, and then the other one kind of like right in between the neck and shoulder blade, kind of like right here. So kind of just clamping down. And then I remember him just smashing the back of her skull on that tile wall that we were discussing earlier, just smashing the back of it. And at that moment, I was actually thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like he's going to kill Judge Holthus. And, I remember after he'd smacked her skull, he had actually dragged her down. So he goes and does that, and then he actually drags her down, almost twists her a little bit, and was like face to face with the judge. And at this point, I am almost like on his back trying to get him up. And he's like this. And Judge Holthus is actually, Judge Holthus was like frozen at the time. I mean, she was literally frozen solid, almost like a piece of petrified wood. She was just not even moving. I think she was in a state of shock at the time. And he was yelling things at her. He was saying things to her, and I couldn't make out anything that he was saying because I was actually in turn screaming at him and saying, "Get off the judge! Get off the judge! What are you doing?" I was like, "What's wrong with you? Get off the judge!" And I remember vividly just how strong Mr. Redden was. I mean, this guy, he is unbelievably strong and much bigger than me. So I'm trying to wrestle him and get him off, and he is glued to her like a magnet, like an actual magnet. Like I couldn't pry him off of her. And it actually I'm sorry.
Where was he grabbing her at that time?
Same thing. It kind of just the hair and right here. So, and would not let go. Like was just stuck on her.
And you indicated that he was right in her face, approximately how far?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't get any closer. I mean, like almost like touching noses. Like this. And
I'm sorry, could you
turn
that?
Yeah, almost like this. I mean, literally like this, like yelling at her, saying things at her. This is when he had kind of twisted her, and I'm on his back, and they're almost this close, like face to face.
Approximately like 3 to 6 inches apart, maybe?
Yeah, I'd say so, maybe even closer. And they are close, and she's completely unresponsive, just petrified, just completely, like I said, just a state of shock.
Had you ever seen Judge Holthus in that state before?
Oh, never in my life. I've never seen her, let alone really anyone. I mean, she was frozen solid, and just, I mean, it was like I said, I mean, it was unbelievable to see, especially coming from her. And I've known her a long time, and I've never seen anything like that.
Generally speaking, would you say that she is a timid person or a strong person?
Absolutely a strong person, very strong person. She's strong personality, really tough. not much can really rile her, but I've never seen her like that, ever.
And you indicated that he was screaming things at her. You don't have any recollection of specific statements he was making?
I have none. Honestly, some of it, you can't even hear much because so much adrenaline kicks in. It's like everything kind of goes silent. I remember just him saying things to her, and I remember saying things to him, but I can't really make out anything that was said.
What was the tone of voice that he was using?
I don't even, I remember him saying things, almost like it was a pretty stern voice, but I can't really make out much. Even the tone too much, to be honest. He was, because I was just so, like I said, it was like everything went blank, and I'm yelling at him. I'm like, get off the judge, I'm so just focused on trying to just get him up, and it was just so unusual, and I just wasn't even really paying attention to anything that he was saying.
As you were trying to pull him up, what was he doing with his body?
Oh, he was just stuck to her. There was no getting him up. He was fighting tooth and nail. I'm trying my best to get him up, and he is just latched onto her. There is no getting this guy off of her. It was unbelievable. I actually remember saying to myself, I could not believe how strong Mr. Redden is. It was unbelievable. I could not. I'm just trying my best. I'm struggling to try to just get the guy up just a little bit. Off judge, and he is just glued to her.
Where were your arms placed on Mr. Redden as you were trying to lift him off?
Yeah. So honestly, I was almost like kind of around him. I kind of grabbed his shoulders like this, kind of like, imagine this was his head, not in like a chokehold or anything, but kind of like right underneath, and kind of grabbing him with his other arm and just trying to just lift him up, anything I could do, to just try to, get him off the judge.
So your arms were wrapped around his chest area?
Almost, yeah, kind of like right here, almost like right below the neck area.
And he continued to go towards her and was refusing to let go?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Just kind of, like I said, just still with that kind of just death grip almost.
And you indicated previously that you, at the time that you were seeing this occur initially, you had the thought, oh my God, he's going to kill her?
Yes, especially when I saw her hit the back of her skull on that tile. I absolutely thought he's going to kill her.
When you observed his hand, I believe you indicated that it was between the shoulder and the neck area. Mm-hmm. Was she already on the ground at that point, or was that as he was kind of flying into her forcefully?
Right when he kind of did this, where his hands landed is almost where they stayed the entire time. So they kind of just, like I said, kind of just latched on, and there was no letting go. So he kind of did twist her a little bit, and when they were on the floor, but they didn't really move much, the hands, and that's basically it.
Can you tell me, when they were on the ground, how they were positioned?
It kind of had changed. So like I said, they were face to face. But then when I was trying to get him up, he kind of had gotten up a little bit. She was still kind of frozen. But he had his hands right on her hair, and still in that like neck area. He's got long arms, so he's kind of holding her like this. I'm trying to get him up, and he's just relentless, trying to just get back at her. And they kind of just changed positions a little bit, depending on kind of just wrestling with me also as well. They kind of started out like this, but that only had lasted just momentarily. He was still saying things to her, but she kind of, like I said, was just kind of frozen a little bit, and there's just a little bit of like wrestling going on almost. But those hands stayed kind of where they were.
Was he directly on top of her? Was he next to her?
At first, he was on top of her, and then as I was kind of pulling him off, and then especially when the CO came, he'd kind of gotten up a little bit and kind of maneuvered his body, but kind of hands, stayed in place.
When you say that he'd kind of gotten up a bit, was he on his knees? Was he still on the ground flat? What was he doing?
When he had first jumped over, it was such an incredible jump that he had like almost landed on his knees, but like he actually wasn't like fully flat on the ground. It wasn't like he had just laid on top of her. He almost had like a pretty good formation, I guess, of where he was. So like he almost had like a leg out and kind of was able to really be on top of her and kind of prevent anyone from just kind of, he wasn't like he was just dead weight and couldn't lift him up. He had like a good position on her. And that's why I think also, it was so hard to lift Mr. Redden off of her. So he was just kind of in a good spot and was not letting go, almost just determined, like he was on a mission or something.
While she was on the ground and he was kind of on top of her, or at least had his hands around her neck, shoulder area, and had her by the hair, did you see him do anything else to her?
No, I didn't see him really do anything else to her other than, screaming at her and kind of just having his hands like that. That was basically it. I didn't see really any like punches or anything like that.
You indicated that he was extremely strong.
Yes.
Like incredible strength.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What about his physical build?
Oh, he's a big guy, a lot bigger than me, and athletic, very strong, tall, and I've been in that courtroom many times. I don't know anyone that can make that kind of a jump. It was honestly impressive.
Do you have any idea approximately how tall he is?
I believe he's like 6'2", maybe 6'1".
You indicated that at some point you became aware that the correctional officer had jumped in to assist you.
Yes, yeah, so it was about 7 seconds of me wrestling with him before the correction officer could make his way past that barrier we were talking about, because he was sitting in the witness stand similar to how I am now, and then he had taken about 7 seconds before he could actually cross that barrier, because once you are able to get through that, it's essentially just you and whoever's back there. So at that point, it was me and the judge, and you're blocked off from everyone else in that courtroom. So it took about 7 seconds of me kind of wrestling with Mr. Redden to try to get him up before the correction officer came in, and actually until the correction officer had come. I was unable to actually get him off of her, and thankfully when the correctional officer came, it took both of us, we were able to finally unlatch him from Judge Holthus.
And when you unlatched him initially, did he stay unlatched?
When we had gotten him up, yeah, I mean, I would say when he was actually up, yes. I remember him, because I kind of had him, my arms were almost on his chest area, right below his neck, kind of like right here. And I remember holding on to my arms, and I remember thinking to myself, I hope he's not going to turn around and attack me. So I remember just trying to get him up. I remember holding on, fighting, just really trying to get back at the judge. And I remember the correctional officer being right there. And I was actually under the impression, once the correctional officer was there, that there were more officers behind him. I remember seeing a blue suit. I wasn't sure at the time who that individual was, but I just thought there were actually more people that were right there that were coming to our aid. So when we finally gotten him up, I actually had kind of let go. I kind of stopped engaging in the situation, because it's not really my place to put my life on the line and try to protect the judge, and at the same time also didn't want to get in the way, because I'd seen the officers. I'm not really trained, and I didn't want to kind of be somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, so I actually completely almost let up entirely, and at that time.
Okay, and when you let up initially, what did you do? Where did you turn your attention?
Where did Mr. Redden turn his attention?
Where did you turn your attention at that point?
I was watching the situation. I was watching where Judge was also. She was kind of my first priority. But I had kind of just completely let up and just watched the correctional officer there kind of, was hoping he would be able to contain the individual.
The correctional officer that assisted you, was he armed with a firearm that day?
Yes, he was.
You saw the firearm on his side?
Oh, yeah.
And did you observe that firearm on his side during this interaction?
Yes.
At some point, do things go south again?
Yes, they do. So I'd kind of let up, like I said earlier, and the correctional officer, who is much smaller than Mr. Redden, the correctional officer, and I remember too, I had a blue suit at the time that was right here, so I was under the impression that was another officer, and I'd let up, and then I remember Mr. Redden just going at the correctional officer and just winding back his arm and just landing blows, like really big blows, just boom, boom. And then I realized it was actually Jory in the blue suit right there, and it wasn't another officer. It was one of the DAs who had ran around. So when I had seen that, I'm like, oh my God, this is far from over. So that's when I had no choice, but had to jump back in and try my best to help subdue Mr. Redden.
You indicated, you made kind of a fist when you were punching. Was he striking the correctional officer with a closed fist?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was complete. I mean, like I said, real big windups, just huge blows. And I actually remember saying to myself, I hope he doesn't, grab the gun and maybe start shooting at someone in the courtroom. I don't know what's going to happen. I know the correctional officer's got a loaded gun right there, and now the correctional officer's in distress, and it's just me and a DA here. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, to be honest.
And what actions did you take to assist at that point?
At that time, I began punching Mr. Redden and try my best to help, and I remember eventually Shane had gotten up, which was our marshal at the time. He had gotten up and ran around, and at that point in time, another DA, Mr. Scow, he had actually gone around, and there was about 5 of us trying to contain him.
Okay, so when you say that Shane had gotten up and come around, do you mean he'd gone around that kind of triangular shaped wall?
No, he had gone around the other side where like the witness stand would be, kind of like right here.
Okay, and you said the other DA, Richard Scow, was also back there now assisting?
Yes.
So it was you, Jory Scarborough, Richard Scow, Shane Marshall, and the corrections officer.
That's correct.
And ultimately, with the assistance of these 4 other people, are you all able to get him detained or restrained?
Yeah. When it took 5 of us, but once we were able to kind of get him, the correctional officer managed to get up, and with the help of everyone, we were able to, like I said, finally, contain Mr. Redden. And the minute that the correctional officer had gotten up, and I'd realized that, kind of the situation was handled, that I immediately went to check on Judge.
And when you went to go check on the judge, what did you observe about her?
Oh, she was frightened. She was in a fetal position right underneath the bench. There's like where my feet are now, there's a similar kind of opening where she sits, and she was literally in a fetal position, shaking, just still frozen, scared for her life, just, almost like this, like just in a full state of just shock.
Is it fair to say that even once Mr. Redden had kind of been finally constrained or detained, he was still lying in the area where you and the judge would?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he was laying there for quite some time.
And was that while he was being handcuffed so that he could be relocated?
Yes, and I remember a flood of security coming in and marshals and other people coming to help.
When you checked on Judge Holthus, did you try to get her to go back into chambers with you?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, I stayed by her side the entire time. I didn't leave her side after that, and I remember her not wanting to go through our normal walkway whatsoever. She was so scared that she actually hopped over where that clerk sits. She actually hopped over that other side because she was so just scared and just, like I said, just it's kind of the state of just shock and emotion that she couldn't bring herself to just walk through that other area.
Once Mr. Redden was relocated, was she then able to exit out her normal path?
Well, no, she went over, like I said, she went right over where that clerk is, that big wall. She wouldn't go, she wouldn't walk through that normal path.
You also indicated that you became aware of an injury to Marshal Shane Brandon
Yes.
after things kind of settled down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember when all the people were kind of trying to detain him, like all 5 of us. I remember looking up at Shane, who was sitting, or standing almost right here, and I remember seeing his head busted wide open like an onion peel, and his forehead was literally dangling off of his forehead. And I remember, him saying, "How's the judge? How's the judge? How's everyone?" And him, kind of just worrying about everyone else. And meanwhile, he's got an injury to, to himself. I'm like worried about us. How are you?
Mr. Redden was not bleeding, though, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I want to show you some photographs on the overhead showing you states 17. Do you recognize this as a photograph of the bench area after the incident?
Yes.
And the disturbance, the papers all over the place, the apparent blood on some of the paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
Is that all the result of Mr. Redden trying to attack Judge Holthus that day?
Absolutely.
Or attacking her?
Absolutely.
And the blood that's on the paperwork, is that Marshal Brandon's blood?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Counsel, how many more questions? I'd like
Just-
to give the jurors.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Showing you states 18. The area where Judge Holthus was curled up in the fetal position, is that depicted in this photograph?
Yeah, it would be right there, kind of right underneath
Right
that
here?
monitor. Yes, exactly.
Showing you states 19. Is this the area where you would typically be seated during a counter?
Yep.
And obviously, this is after the incident on January 3rd of 2024.
Correct. And the reason why there's so much blood is because that's where our marshal was over, trying to help and assist, like I said, kind of right here. So that's where the witness stand would be, and that's why there's so much blood in that area.
Showing you states 20. Is this the stair leading up to the judge's bench area?
Yes, it is.
And the floor?
Yep.
Just outside? And this disturbance was, or the papers and the trash can being knocked over, that's all part of the incident, correct?
Correct.
Course indulgence. I'll pass witness, Your Honor.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break. During You all may be seated. Okay, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any representations that you'd like to make?
Your Honor, it is my understanding that Mr. Redden is going to plead guilty but mentally ill to all of the charges in the second amended indictment that was previously filed. The state is willing to stipulate to allow him to withdraw his prior pleas of guilty so that he can enter pleas of guilty but mentally ill to counts 2 through 7. And he's also pleading guilty but mentally ill to count 1.
And that's our understanding, Your Honor, and he's prepared to go forward with the plea agreement.
Okay. All right.
But in terms of the negotiations, Your Honor, there are no negotiations. Each side will argue for a lawful sentence under the statute.
Okay. All right. Mr. Redden?
Yes.
I'm going to be asking your lawyer to state in open court the substance of the plea agreement. In other words, the most important terms of the negotiations or agreement between you and the state. Actually, this is a guilty plea memorandum.
Correct.
Okay. I want you to listen carefully, as after your lawyer's done speaking, I'm going to ask you if you heard him and if you agree that this is what the parties have agreed to enter into. All right?
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Earl?
Your Honor, he's agreeing to plead guilty, but mentally ill to count 1, attempted murder, victim 60 years of age or older. Count 2, battery on a protected person, resulting in substantial bodily harm, victim over 60 years of age or older. Count 3, intimidating a public officer. Count 4, battery on an officer resulting in substantial bodily harm. Count 5, performance of act or neglect of duty in willful or wanton disregard of safety of persons or property resulting in substantial bodily harm or death. Count 6, battery by prisoner. Count 7, unlawful act related to human excrement or bodily fluid.
Okay, and this is what I will do. Once I canvass Mr. Redden, I will go ahead and allow him to withdraw his guilty plea with respect to the counts 2 through 7.
Thank you, Your
Did
Honor.
I get the numbers right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Redden,
Yes.
did you hear your lawyer just state the substance of the guilty plea memorandum?
Yes.
Okay. Did he accurately state the terms that you had agreed in order to resolve the criminal charges lodged against you?
Yes.
Do you read, write, and understand the English language?
I do.
Okay. Did you receive a copy of the guilty plea memorandum?
I did.
Did you review the second amended indictment?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you receive a copy of that as well?
Yes.
Okay. Do you need me to read the second amended indictment now before we take your plea?
No, you don't.
Okay. Before accepting your guilty plea, there's a number of questions I'm going to have to ask you in order to assure me you are entering a valid plea. If you do not understand any of my questions, will you please let me know so that I can rephrase them?
I will.
If at any time you wish to take a break in the proceedings so that you can discuss matters in private with your lawyer, will you let me know so that I can give you an opportunity to do so?
Yes.
How old are you, sir?
I'm 31.
Where were you born?
Las Vegas, Nevada.
What is the extent of your education?
12.
Did you graduate from high school?
No.
Would it be fair to say you dropped out in the 12th grade?
Yes.
Okay. You finished the 11th grade?
Yes.
Okay. Are you taking any medications or suffering from any medical, physical, or mental health conditions that would interfere with your ability to understand these proceedings and the terms of the guilty plea memorandum?
I am on mental health meds, but as long as I'm on that, I don't believe that it'll affect any of my
Okay.
business understanding.
Well, I know that you've got to be on some medication, sir. I think we've been discussing that here today. But I want to know, are you taking any medications or suffering from any medical, physical, or mental health conditions that would interfere with your ability to understand what is going on here today or the terms of the guilty plea memorandum?
Oh, no.
You fully understand?
Yes.
Have you had an ample opportunity to discuss your case with your lawyer, Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Are you satisfied to have him as your lawyer and the advice that he has given to you?
Yes.
Do you understand you are entitled to have an attorney represent you at every stage of the proceeding lodged against you?
Yes.
Do you understand you're entitled to a trial by jury, at which in order to convict you, all of the jurors would have to agree that you are guilty?
Yes.
Do you understand at trial you would be presumed to be innocent, and the state would have to overcome that presumption and prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
Do you understand that to do this, the witnesses for the state would have to come to court and testify in your presence, and your lawyer could cross-examine those witnesses?
Yes.
Do you also understand that your lawyer could object to evidence offered by the state at the trial and could call witnesses and present evidence on your behalf?
Yes.
Do you understand at trial, while you have the right to testify if you chose to do so, you also would have the right not to testify, and if you decided not to testify at your trial, the state would not be able to use the fact you did not testify in any way to prove its case?
Yes.
Do you understand that by entering your guilty pleas, you are giving up these rights and other rights listed in the guilty plea memorandum?
Yes.
Are you aware of the penalties for committing the crimes which are listed in count 1 through count 7?
Yes.
I'd like to review all of them with you. This will take a little bit of time, but I want to make sure you understand, okay? Do you understand, as a consequence of entering a plea of guilty but mentally ill, you have the burden of establishing your mental illness by a preponderance of the evidence?
Oh, yes.
Do you understand that except as otherwise provided by specific statute, as a defendant who has entered such a plea, you would be subject to the same criminal, civil, and administrative penalties and procedures as a defendant who regularly just pleads guilty?
Wait,
Sure. Do you understand, except as provided by specific statute, as a defendant who has entered a plea of guilty but mentally ill, you are subject to the same criminal, civil, and administrative penalties and procedures as a defendant who pleads guilty?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, do you understand that if the court finds by a preponderance of the evidence you are not mentally ill at the time of sentencing, that the court may impose any sentence that the court is authorized to impose upon a defendant who pleads or is found guilty of the same offense, or that you are mentally ill at the time of if you are mentally ill at the time of sentencing, the court shall impose any sentence the court is authorized to impose upon a defendant who pleads or is found guilty of the same offense, and include in that sentence an order that you, during the period of your confinement or probation, be given or obtain such treatment as is medically indicated for your mental illness. Do you understand that?
Yes.
That's all set forth on page 2 of the guilty plea memorandum.
Mhm.
Okay, do you understand that as a consequence of your plea of guilty but mentally ill, the court must sentence you as follows? First, with respect to count 1, the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 2 years and a maximum term of not more than 20 years, plus a consecutive sentence of 1 year to 20 years for the age enhancement. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Do you understand the minimum term of imprisonment may not exceed 40% of the maximum term of imprisonment?
Yes.
Do you also understand that you also may be fined?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that you are eligible for probation for the offense to which you are pleading guilty?
Yes, I understand.
Do you also understand, except as provided by statute, the question of whether you receive probation is in the discretion of the sentencing judge?
Yes.
With respect to count 2, do you understand that the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 2 years and a maximum term of not more than 10 years, plus a consecutive sentence of 2 years, minimum 2 years to 10 years for the age enhancement?
Yes.
Do you, again, as with count 1, do you understand that the minimum term of imprisonment may not exceed 40% of the maximum term of imprisonment?
Yes.
Do you also understand in that situation you may also be fined for that?
Yes.
And as, like count 1, do you also understand you are eligible for probation for the offense to which you are pleading guilty, meaning count 2?
Yes.
With respect to count 3, do you understand that the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 1 year and a maximum term of not more than 5 years?
Yes.
Do you also understand that you could be fined up to $10,000?
Yes.
And as with respect to counts 1 and 2, the minimum term of imprisonment may not exceed 40% of the maximum term of imprisonment.
Yes.
And I might save a little bit of time, but the minimum term of imprisonment may not exceed 40% of the maximum term of imprisonment would also apply to counts 4, 5, and 6, and 7. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. And you also understand that you are eligible for probation with
Yes.
respect to those other counts,
Yes.
as well as count 3.
Yes.
Your Honor, I think count 7 is actually non-probationable.
Okay. Okay. I will get to count 7. I thank you, counsel, for doing that. You are not eligible for probation with respect to count 7. We will get to that in a few moments. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to count 4, do you understand the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 2 years and a maximum term of not more than 10 years?
Yes.
Do you understand in that instance you may be fined up to $10,000?
Yes.
With respect to count 5, do you understand that the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 1 year and a maximum term of not more than 5 years?
Yes.
Do you also understand you could be fined up to $10,000 with respect to that count?
Yes.
With respect to count 6, do you understand that the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 1 year and a maximum term of not more than 6 years?
Yes.
Do you also understand in that instance you could be fined up to $5,000?
Yes.
Okay, and that again is with respect to count 6. With respect to count 7, do you understand that the court must sentence you to imprisonment in the Nevada Department of Corrections for a minimum term of not less than 2 years and a maximum term of not more than 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, and you do understand that you are not eligible for probation for the offense to which you're pleading guilty with respect to count 7?
Yes.
And do you understand you could also be fined up to $10,000?
Yes.
And in any case, that the law does require you to pay certain administrative assessment fees?
Yes.
Do you also understand the court may order you to make restitution to any victim of the offense to which you are pleading guilty?
Yes.
Has anyone threatened you or forced you to plead guilty but mentally ill?
No.
Has anyone told you if you do not plead guilty but mentally ill, some other adverse action will be taken against you?
No.
And I take it that you have, you've received a copy of the guilty plea memorandum,
Yes.
okay? And your signature is affixed thereon on page 8, is that right?
That's true.
And your lawyer, Mr. Arnold, he signed the guilty plea memorandum on page 9?
Yes.
Prior to signing the guilty plea memorandum, did you read it?
Yes, I did.
Did you discuss it with your lawyer before you signed it?
Yeah, I did.
Did he answer all of your questions?
Yes, he did.
Did you sign the guilty plea memorandum willfully, knowingly, and voluntarily?
Yes.
Do you feel you understand the terms of the guilty plea memorandum?
I do.
Has anyone made any promise to you, other than those set forth within the guilty plea memorandum, that induced or caused you to plead guilty but mentally ill?
I'm sorry.
Sure. Has anyone made any promise to you, other than those set forth within the guilty plea memorandum, that induced or caused you to plead guilty but mentally ill?
No.
Okay. You understand that later on, when there are requests with respect to sentences or any sentences that may be agreed to by your lawyer and the lawyers for the state would not be binding upon the sentencing judge.
I don't understand what that means.
Do you understand that sentencing is totally up to me?
Okay, yes.
That's irrespective of whatever your attorney argues to me. If later on there's deals made between your lawyer and the lawyers for the state, I don't have to abide by those deals. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you also understand that you might, on the basis of your guilty plea but mentally ill, receive, if there was any deals going on, that you could receive a more severe sentence than that, either requested, recommended, stipulated, argued by your lawyer?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions as to what you're alleged to have done within the second amended indictment?
No.
Do I need to review all that with him?
He's never been canvassed as to count 1, Your Honor. I think the parties can agree to incorporate the factual basis from his previous plea as to counts 2 through 7, but he's never been canvassed as to count 1.
Okay, let me go through that. I don't have that right in front of me, so let me pull it up. I'm going to go through all the counts.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the, well, it's called the amended indictment. And it was filed on August 30th.
It's the second amendment that was filed on Tuesday, Your Honor. That's the charging document we're going off of.
Okay. Okay, I need it. Yeah, apparently it was filed in open court, counsel, and I, for whatever reason, hasn't made it yet, but they're going to do it like right this minute. I'm going to email them right now, Your Honor.
I can email the court a copy if you want to read from that charge.
If you got a file stamp on it, I'd be happy to do that.
We can see that. Just give me another copy.
In fact, counsel, would you approach?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Redden?
Yes.
She's got a copy that is file stamped, well, it's not file stamped, but it is the one that was filed. I'm going to go ahead and review the second amended indictment with you, if I may, and tell me if this is what you did. And again, you're pleading guilty, but mentally ill. I appreciate that, so I may not add all of that. Okay, tell me if this is what you did with respect to count 1, attempt murder, victim 60 years of age or older, that you willfully and lawfully and feloniously and with malice aforethought attempt to kill Judge Mary Kay Holthus, who is 60 years of age or older, to wit, during your rendition of sentence, and once you knew she was about to sentence you to prison, did leap over defense counsel's table into the well of the courtroom, and thereafter rushing towards the judicial bench and jumping over it Superman style, directly into Judge Mary Kay Holthus's judicial space, landing directly on top of her, and immediately attacking Judge Mary Kay Holthus by grabbing her, pulling her hair, placing your hands around her throat, and or hitting her on the head by manner and means unknown. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to count 2, tell me if this is what you did. That, and by the way, this is on or about January 3rd, 2024 in Clark County, Nevada. That with respect to battery on protected person resulting in substantial bodily harm, victim over 60 years of age or older, that you did willfully and lawfully and knowingly use force or violence upon the person of another, to wit, Judge Mary Kay Holthus, who is 60 years of age or older and is a protected person employed as an 8th Judicial District Court judge while Judge Mary Kay Holthus was performing the duties of an 8th Judicial District Court judge, which you knew or should have known that Judge Mary Kay Holthus was an 8th Judicial District Court judge by grabbing her, pulling her hair, placing your hands around her throat, and or hitting her on the head by manner and means unknown, resulting in substantial bodily harm to Judge Mary Kay Holthus. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
Okay, with respect to count 3, intimidating public officer, that on the same date, place, and time, that, tell me if this is what you did, that you did willfully, unlawfully, and feloniously, directly or indirectly, address any threat or intimidation to a public officer, namely Judge Mary Kay Holthus, a judicial officer, with intent to induce her, contrary to her duty to do, make, omit, or delay any act, decision, or determination with use of physical force or the immediate threat of such force, to wit, during the rendition of sentence, and once you knew she was about to sentence you to prison, did leap over defense counsel's table into the well of the courtroom, thereafter rushing towards the judicial bench and jumping over it Superman style directly into Judge Mary Kay Holthus' judicial space, landing directly on top of her and immediately attacking Judge Mary Kay Holthus by grabbing her, pulling her hair, placing your hands around her throat, and or hitting her on the head by manner and means unknown. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
Count 4, battery on an officer resulting in substantial bodily harm. On the same date same date and place, tell me if this is what you did. That you did willfully, unlawfully, and knowingly use force or violence upon the person of another, to wit, J. Cabralda, who is performing the duties of a peace officer employed with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, which you knew or should have known that J. Cabralda was an officer by punching and or kicking and or pushing the officer, such acts resulting in substantial bodily harm. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to count 5, at the same date, place, and time, tell me if this is what you did. That count 5, performance of act or neglect of duty in willful or wanton disregard of safety of persons or property resulting in substantial bodily harm or death. That you did then and there unlawfully, willfully, unlawfully, feloniously perform an act in willful or wanton disregard of the safety of persons or property in the following manner, to wit, by jumping over the defense counsel's table into the well of the courtroom, thereafter rushing at the judicial bench and leaping over it Superman style to attack and or kill the judge, causing Marshall S. Brandon and others to respond in defense of your actions towards the judge, resulting in substantial bodily harm or death to Marshall S. Brandon. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to count 6, battery by prisoner, on the same date and place and time, tell me if this is what you did. That you did willfully, unlawfully, feloniously, and knowingly use force or violence upon the person of another, to wit, Officer C. Boo, by spitting on Officer C. Boo, defendant you at the time of the offense being a prisoner in lawful custody or confinement. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
With respect to count 7, on the same date and place, and the act being unlawful act relating to human excrement or bodily fluid, tell me if this is what you did. That you did then and there, willfully, unlawfully, feloniously, and intentionally use, propel, discharge, or spread any human excrement or bodily fluid consisting of saliva with the intent to have the excrement or bodily fluid come into physical contact with any portion of the body of another person, or under circumstances in which the excrement or bodily fluid was reasonably likely to have come into contact with any portion of the body of another person, to wit, Officer C. Boo, whether or not such contact actually occurred while you were a prisoner in lawful confinement, you committing the offense in the following manner, to wit, by spitting saliva on Officer Boo. Did you do that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And for that reason, you are pleading guilty to committing the crimes by pleading guilty but mentally ill to committing the crimes of count 1, attempt murder, victim 60 years of age or older, a category B felony in violation of NRS 200.010, NRS 200.030, NRS 193.153, and NRS 193.167. Count 2, battery on a protected person resulting in substantial bodily harm, victim over 60 years of age or older, a category B felony in violation of NRS 200.481, Count 3, intimidating public officer, a Category C felony in violation of NRS 199.300. Count 4, battery on an officer resulting in substantial bodily harm, a Category B felony in violation of NRS 200.481. Count 5? Is that what I'm on? Count 5, performance of act or neglect of duty in willful or wanton disregard of safety of persons or property resulting in substantial bodily harm or death, a Category C felony in violation of NRS 202.595, Count 6, battery by prisoner, a Category B felony in violation of NRS 200.481 2F, and Count 7, unlawful act relating to human excrement or bodily fluid, Category B felony in violation of NRS 212.189. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Is the state satisfied with that canvass?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. At this time, I am going to allow Mr. Redden to withdraw his original guilty pleas to counts 2 through 7, and it is the finding of the court the defendant is fully competent and capable of entering an informed plea with respect to the 7 counts, and that your plea of guilty but mentally ill is a knowing and voluntary plea supported by an independent basis in fact, containing the essential elements of the offense charged, and for that reason this court accepts your guilty pleas. We need to give this gentleman a sentencing date.
Yes, and I believe defense counsel was requesting 60 days.
Yes, Your Honor.
60 days?
Yes, Your Honor.
I think we can accommodate that.
Court's indulgence, Your Honor.
Sure.
Judge, just for the record, was the, Mr. Arnold's acknowledgement attached to the guilty plea agreement?
I've got it, yes.
Just wanted to-
Certificate of counsel?
Yes,
It's there.
thank you.
Okay, and, go ahead.
November the 7th, would you like a special time, Your Honor?
Do you want a special time?
Yes, please.
Usually I have my calendar at 8:30. Do you want to do it after? Like, or do you want to do it in the afternoon?
We can go 10:30 or 11, or we can do the afternoon, whatever. Afternoon would be better.
Oh, now this shouldn't be a Wednesday.
No, I'm saying that on a Thursday.
Okay. Yeah, because I have gotten where I just don't do so on, there's just no way I can get it done. Right now, we've got 6 criminal sessions on that. I could probably do it at noon, if you want to just do it at noon.
Whatever Mr. Arnold's preference is.
That's fine, Your Honor.
Okay. We'll just take a later lunch, okay?
November the 7th at noon.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Clerk, I'd like these documents, Dr. Paglini's report, left side filed, as well as Leah Rowley, Dr. Leah Rowley's report, left side filed. Okay? Okay, and thank you very much.